All right, people are starting to join. All right, people are starting to join. Oh, Teresa Smith. I know Teresa.
As I say, I got a text this morning from Caitlin Schiffers or Scherfers, excuse me, from Arlington High School, telling me she was going to log in. So
Teresa Smith works for adult ed, at the Department of Labor, and I sent her the link to join, and she did. So I'm really happy.
had I not been in this room with you already, this would have been one of the sessions I would have logged in.
All right, so my computer says that it's 9:30. Phone still says 9:29. So I'll give everybody a little more time to join. We got 56 in here, and the number is gradually increasing. Oh, Angela Ford, thanks for joining. Okay. So, all right, my phone and my computer both say that it's 9:30. We don't have a ton of time. I'd love to start on time and end on time with this. So for those of you who are here, thank you for joining. Before we get started, I kind of just want to share my screen and show you a few things. It's Thursday. We're 4 days into this. As you know, technology may fail us. Some of the interface might not be the most user-friendly, but let me show you a few things real quick that can help you as you go through this session. So the first thing that I'm going to share is just my actual browser. I'm going to show you my browser here. And in this browser is where you can access your chat. You can access the various participants, the files, which everybody in here will have access to, the presentation, the actual presenter notes with links that you can use when you go into the classroom or the virtual classroom. And then as well, we also have polls. And these polls are listed, aside from this kind of default one that gets sent up here, these polls are listed in the order that they'll appear in the presentation. So when I'm actually participating in the Zoom presentation just as a viewer, not as a broadcaster, what I do is I'll kind of allow this window to appear on the right side of my screen when I work with just a single monitor, and then I'll put the Zoom the Zoom presentation on the left side of my screen so I can access them both at the same time. I, as a presenter, won't have access to both of these because when I share my PowerPoint presentation, the only thing that occupies my screen is that actual slide that you'll see. So Gina, as our host, she's going to help us with this. I do urge you as we go through this, if you can, and if you would like, please respond to the actual poll questions, and Gina can report out your responses. And if you have questions, you can type them in the chat. I think that's a lot easier than using the default poll that comes up in here where it says enter questions for the speaker. Because as a rule, Gina, as our room host, is going to be taking a look at the chat for your questions. And then when it comes time for us to answer a poll question, she's just simply going to click on the polls and see what the results look like. So from our end, we can click on the poll results to see it, as can you. So with that said, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and then go into my PowerPoint so we can get started. PowerPoint. Share. And broadcast. Okay. Just going to read this from a script so you guys can hear and see and follow along if you have actually picked up the presenter notes. Welcome to Promising WBL Practices in a Virtual or Hybrid Learning Environment. My name is Matthew Spinella, and I'm the Director of Work-Based Learning and Industry Engagement for the Tennessee Department of Education. I'm joined by Southwest Tennessee WBL Regional Lead and health science instructor, Gina Jordan. Gina will be our host today, fielding comments, questions, and feedback. Your questions and comments are welcome in the chat box, so don't hesitate to share your feedback with the group. The purpose of this course is to provide information about policies, procedures, and best practices associated with capstone WBL courses in a virtual or hybrid learning environment. With only 45 minutes, we're going to deliver a high-level overview and share effective links to resources that you can dig into after the session. For additional support, feel free to contact me, and we can schedule some time to discuss anything from this presentation in further detail. But before we get started, let's take a poll. So participants, please go into the polls section of your browser and click on the first poll right below the one that asks you to share your questions with the presenter. When you return to school, what model will your district implement for the 2020-21 school year? Your options are fully online, hybrid, fully in person with an option for online, other, or unknown. So you got 5 options, and I'm going to give you guys 45 seconds to share your results. All right, so Gina, can you take a look at the poll and see what kind of results we have at this time?
Actually, I cannot see it. I'm trying to make it appear back on my side over here. When you shared your screen, it went away.
Do you see the results? Because I'm actually
See them.
sorry.
I cannot see them.
Oh, okay.
I need
Not
to,
a problem.
I need to
There
get
were
back to the area where I can see the chat because.
okay. So I have a few participants who've raised their hand. Perhaps they're going to talk to us about something. Let's go in the order they came in. Christy. Hey, Christy. I'm going to unmute you. Okay. Gina, can you go ahead and click on the attendees and unmute Christy?
Good morning.
Hey, hello.
Matthew and Gina, I cannot get to the section where I can type in the chat or the polls while I'm watching this Zoom, so I don't know what to do.
That's I'm having the same issue myself.
Okay.
Or I can't see the polls, the chats, or anything.
So when that happens, what I've done is you can exit full screen on your Zoom, and then you can actually like shrink the size of your Zoom page, the window itself, and then you can actually also shrink the size of your browser so that on one side of your screen, you'll have your Zoom, on the other, you'll have your browser. If you're not able to do that, it's not too big of a deal. The content that we're kind of working with, the polls were kind of designed to get some interaction. So for those who can access it, fantastic. For those who can't, if you're unable to kind of like shrink the screen and put the windows side by side, it's not a big deal. We may actually just kind of call an audible and ask everybody to answer the poll questions after the session if they're unable to do so during the session. But we can gather the data, and I'll actually include the results in next Thursday's Work-Based Learning Coordinator Connection, because I'm going to be sharing this presentation as well with everybody. So I guess in the interest of kind of proceeding, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and move on to the next slide. Thank you for your question, Christy. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen now. I can say this. In many instances where my children are going to school, we're actually adopting a fully in-person model. And with that, those who choose not to go fully in person will have an option going fully online. So, and Gina is actually going to a hybrid model where she teaches as well. So obviously you'll see different districts are making different decisions. But the bottom line is we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. So let's use this session as an opportunity to cover our bases and prepare for any scenario we think we may encounter. I can actually go into this. Okay. So work-based learning is a strong connection to the department's best for all strategic plan in that it allows students to recognize what they like, what they're good at, and how to leverage those into a fulfilling career. Our main goals are to share as much information as possible in the time that we're given. The strategies and resources we share can be implemented in a variety of educational settings, depending upon your local policies and the needs of your students. As I mentioned before, feel free to contact me if you wish to discuss these topics or any other strategies in further detail. Gina, why don't you read the objectives for everyone as you see them on the screen?
So our objectives today are to analyze Perkins V, definition of work-based learning. And of course, Perkins V has to do with federal money. There's lots of rules where it comes to that. Identify effective strategies for virtual and hybrid delivery of work-based learning curriculum. And address questions related to work-based learning in a virtual or hybrid setting. And I think we all agree in this time of pandemic, this is definitely going to be a fluid situation.
Absolutely. And what you'll see on the bottom left-hand part of the screen, when you access this PowerPoint, there are links, not only in the PowerPoint itself, if you download it, but also in the presenter notes for this session. So a lot of the resources that we describe, because we kind of have a limited amount of time, feel free to dig deeper by clicking on the links that are provided when you do receive them. So before we take a look at the Perkins V definition of work-based learning, I kind of want to share a little bit about, how I defined work-based learning before I ever started. I came from industry. I have a business degree from Rutgers University. I worked in, the real estate and financial industries for about 9 years before I moved to Tennessee, started teaching. And I didn't know anything about cooperative education or work-based learning. I just knew that in college I had an option for an internship. I know that a lot of students in college had options for internship, but I knew nothing about high school work-based learning. And I kind of thought to myself, hey, that's not a bad idea. I think I might want to study something in college, but then I end up going and realizing I need to change my major, right? And there's a lot of results and data that shows how many people change their majors when they start college, a couple of years in, or a year in, or a semester in. And that's money down the drain. So when I learned about work-based learning, I thought, this is a really good opportunity for high school students to really immerse themselves into work and to also see whether or not this is something they want to pursue when they get into college or any post-secondary institution or into the workforce. So Gina, why don't you read the Perkins V definition for work-based learning for us?
Okay, the term work-based learning means sustained interactions with industry or community professionals in a real workplace setting, to the extent practicable, or simulated environments at an educational institution that foster in-depth, first-hand engagement with the tasks required in a given career field that are aligned with curriculum and instruction.
There you go. And so you can see the link on this screen will take you to the legislation for strengthening career and technical education for the 21st century. That's federal code right there. Now, here are some things that I want to highlight about this actual definition, okay? Real workplace settings are ideal, but they're not required, okay? To the extent possible is written right into the code. What is required, however, includes sustained interactions with industry and community professionals, in-depth first-hand engagement with career-specific tasks, alignment between those tasks and the curriculum and instruction, okay? If we were in an actual in-person setting, I'd be looking for some feedback on this. Well, let's take a look at the Tennessee definition for work-based learning and see where they align. So Gina, tell us what Tennessee's definition of work-based learning is.
So work-based learning allow students to apply classroom theories to practical problems, to explore career options, and pursue personal and professional goals. Through work-based learning, students reinforce academic, technical, and social skills by collaborating with industry and community partners.
Now, I want to share this definition was crafted in 2013. This definition you see on your screen, crafted in 2013. The 2020 definition that Perkins V came up with, as you can see, aligns really well. So what that says is, you guys have done a great job. If you've been actually following and implementing these strategies for the past 6 or 7 years, good on you. There's not much adjustment that you'll need to do to comply with Perkins V. The alignment that I see comes in real workplace settings are ideal but not required. Interaction with industry and community partners are emphasized. Application of academic and technical skills in a work setting. And lastly, alignment of student work with curriculum and instruction. Everything we do in our training, everything you see is really in line, falls quite well in line with what's out there in Perkins V definition. Now in Tennessee, we believe that the requirement of work-based learning portfolios takes this experience to the next level, and that our students intentionally document their growth and accomplishments. This is why the portfolio and strong WBL student artifacts are emphasized during our work-based learning trainings. Student portfolios will be the most critical component of quality work-based learning implementation, especially in a virtual or hybrid learning environment. Under ideal circumstances, every work-based learning student would have a placement that perfectly aligns with his or her program of study. The department recognized that even prior to COVID-19, this was not always the case. In these unprecedented times, we should focus on curriculum and instruction that allows students to master the standards, regardless of whether or not they have worksite placements. Some of you may be asking yourselves whether students can participate in external WBL placements in a virtual or hybrid setting. In the next slide, we'll break down how to proceed. Now, the Work-Based Learning Policy Guide, along with your district's local policies, provide exceptional guidance related to students' external work-based learning placements, regardless of whether you'll be returning in person, virtually, or in a hybrid setting. This specific type of learning environment doesn't dictate whether or not a student can participate in an external work-based learning placement. Rather, consult with this checklist and the department's CTE reopening guidance instead. If you can answer yes to all 3 of the requirements on this slide, and if your local stakeholders approve, your students may participate in an external WBL placement. Remember, your district and/or local school board may implement additional local policies associated with WBL placements under any return to school model. The WBL agreement, WBL safety training log, student insurance and emergency information form, and in some cases, hazardous occupation exemption form are required for students to participate in an external placement. Before a student can leave school or home to participate in an external placement, these forms must be filled out and signed by the student, parent/guardian, work-based learning coordinator, administrator, and employer. If all parties agree to sign and consent to student participation in an external placement, that student can participate in said placement. To clarify, work-based learning coordinators must be permitted to make at least 1 visit to the student's placement per grading period. Lastly, the WBL policy guide linked in this slide provides specific requirements outlined by the department for students participating in external WBL placements. Bookmark this link as a reference whenever you have a question about student scenarios. If your students can participate in external work-based learning placements, here are some of the better opportunities that likely have staffing needs in the fall. I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds to type out some other potential placements in the chat. And if we have an opportunity, we'll let Gina take a look at what you have to say.
I'm sorry, Matt, I can't see the chat.
I can actually go into the chat here.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on my end. But
No, not a problem. If I go into the chat, let's see what people have to say.
Gina, I refreshed my page and then it came up, but then it went away.
oh, mercy. I think we're going to spend this entire school year going technical difficulties.
Yeah, right?
And Matthew, there's some on the chat that said that they tried to click on it and they got kicked off the Zoom meeting. They can't get back on.
Oh, no.
This is funny because in my chat, the last chat that I see was shared 16 minutes ago. And I would imagine that's the time that I started broadcasting, perhaps. I'm not sure. The last chat that I see is from Kay Newman. Interesting. All right, well, I guess the good news is, yeah, the good news is what we're going to do is kind of just not make use of any of these interactive options and go strictly with the presentation itself. And then the other good news is it's not as if anybody's really missing out much, simply because I'm reading from the script that everybody has access to, thankfully, and using a PowerPoint that everybody has access to as well. So that's good news for you. I'm going to click share my slides and slideshow. You are screen sharing. There we go. Okay. Now in this next section, we're going to outline how to determine, oh, we actually got there. There. All right. So now that we've covered the definitions for work-based learning and how to determine whether or not a student can participate in an external WBL placement, we're going to talk about the delivery of WBL virtual curriculum in a hybrid setting. Okay. Now, here's the thing. When you are actually working in a hybrid setting, it's always good to consider, right, what you need to do as if you were in a real world setting. Establishing clear and achievable student expectations is the foundation for success in any classroom, whether it's virtual or traditional. When I was a work-based learning coordinator, my students visited their placements sometimes 3 to 4 days a week. So I pretty much always delivered my assignments virtually through an online blog and via email. Each week, my students were expected to read my blog and submit that week's assignment by 2:30 p.m. that Friday. If you use a similar model with your students, delivering curriculum remotely should be relatively easy for you. If not, familiarize yourself with a learning management system platform like Edmodo and a blogging platform like Blogger to allow for clear and consistent communication with your students. I've included a link to my old WBL blog, which includes assignments, templates, and links to various resources, some of which are dated and broken, but many of them are still active, and some additional guidance in this slide as a point of reference. Note that some links to department templates may be broken. Refer to the Work-Based Learning Toolbox for the updated links described in each post. Now, pre-employment preparation is a critical component of work-based learning curriculum. Even if students can't participate in an external placement, there's a variety of opportunities for pre-employment preparation within your work-based learning virtual class. Work with your school counselors to coordinate Zoom meetings about career and educational development plans. They too have been preparing for remote learning opportunities and can be a great asset to your work-based learning class. Employer partners can also help your students with tips about how to make their resume stand out, as well as share important information about how industry is changing. Links to a pre-assessment of student skills and an instructional guide for student interviews with industry professionals are provided for your reference. Because employers are so critical to all elements of work-based learning, they're equally important in virtual or hybrid education models. Consult with your employer partners to find out how they can pivot work-based learning opportunities with students in the same way they've done with their actual employees. Identify any and all work-from-home models that would translate well for your students, and create an action plan for students to get the most out of their class. Some of the more successful opportunities that transition well from in-person to virtual settings include project-based learning, employer or industry-specific training, industry certifications and micro-credentials, class mentorship, and school-based enterprises that follow employer-driven guidance. The next few slides will spotlight programs from throughout the country that have already been put into practice. In Boston, Massachusetts, John Hancock has worked directly with summer interns where high school mentors assign projects to different teams of students. The students utilize Microsoft Teams to conduct their meetings, work collectively and collaboratively on different marketing and management related initiatives, and to create resources that the entire organization will use. Not only does this model enhance the students' experience, John Hancock discovered that students took the initiative to work outside of business hours in addition to their regularly scheduled internship hours. Data shows that students whose internships were originally scheduled for 10 hours per week voluntarily dedicated 14 hours or more each week to their projects. At Bank of America, mentors from 5 different departments mentored summer work-based learning high school interns in the St. Louis area. Each week, these students met with several employees and learned about how COVID-19 affected short and long-term planning, trends in banking and finance, profitability projections, and other big initiatives. Students also completed a research project on the Paycheck Protection Program as a part of their coursework. Now that we've touched on a few different strategies with employer partners, I'd like you to think to yourselves about which of these models and which of these examples you may be able to implement in your own work setting. Now, of course, in any educational setting, student engagement is closely aligned with student growth and achievement. If your district permits you to create work-based learning specific social media accounts, your students can post pictures and videos to promote their hard work. Some teachers can even offer extra credit if posts hit a certain number of likes. This is good. So now at this time, I know we covered a lot. I know it was a short amount of time. I made use of the script. We actually have a little bit of extra time. I was hoping we'd have about 10 minutes to go over Q&A, but it looks like we have 17, which is great. Simply because I covered a lot. It's a short amount of time. And thankfully, even though we weren't able to kind of cover a lot of the interactive elements of this presentation, what we can do is kind of open up the floor at this time, kind of for your questions and answers. So obviously, we have access to the chat. We do have access to allow participants to actually speak and interact with us through the Zoom if you raise your hand. So please, by all means, use this time to kind of ask about maybe some questions that you have, whether it's about work-based learning policy, implementation in a hybrid setting, or any of the actual examples that we discussed today. Oh, we got someone raising hand, that's good.
Okay, she's unmuted.
All right, Anita.
Hi, Anita Rohnbeck. I just moved here from Texas, and I think the program's awesome, but I think the one area that I'm struggling with is developing employer relationships with the whole COVID thing going on. Any suggestions on, how to mentor and how to build those relationships outside of just the normal, hitting the ground and going and talking with people?
Sure. So one resource that you can probably tap very quickly is if you're coming from Texas. In Tennessee, we have in the CTE world what is called an advisory council. It is required in Perkins legislation that every school has an advisory council that includes industry partners. And so when you are interacting with different employers through those advisory councils, you can develop those relationships via online meetings, phone conferences, or in some cases, these businesses will be willing to come and visit you if your district allows and if you feel comfortable. Additionally, another thing that you might want to consider is a lot of local chambers in the past would offer networking events in person, and they've pivoted to online networking events. And so as an educator, when I reached out to my local chamber, they welcomed me with open arms. They were extremely just inviting. I was able to have my students visit a local meeting, speak to the actual chamber members, and present to them about, at that time when I was teaching work-based learning about virtual enterprise, they presented about virtual enterprise. And then later, as I started to teach work-based learning, they did that as well. And what ended up happening was, instead of us having to kind of like knock on their door and say, would you be willing to take my students as an intern? They were knocking on my door and offering internships, and in some cases paid employment, just based off of the example that my students set and what they showed as far as how talented, intelligent, and hardworking they were. So that's a really long way of answering your question. Number one, think about your advisory councils. Number two, don't be shy. Email your local chamber members because they want to help as well.
And Matt, if I can speak to that as well,
Yeah.
take advantage of the people in your school who know everybody. I teach in a school where I don't live, so I didn't really know anybody when I came into my program as well. So take advantage of your administration, the teachers in your school, see what contacts they have and what resources they can put you onto, because they probably know lots and lots of people where you are, whereas, you know, you're like me, I was new to town and didn't know. So take advantage of your faculty and your staff and your administration.
Thank you very much. Those were all great suggestions.
Yeah. And okay, so I'm actually going in here. This says, let's see, can we have a copy of the PowerPoint? Is it possible to record the session? Session is being recorded. And additionally, the PowerPoint can be found in the files tab of this actual session itself. Additionally, if you are subscribed to the Work-Based Learning Monthly Coordinator Connection, you'll get a copy of it as well through there. Someone had to leave to go to an appointment. That's fantastic. Hope all goes well, Megan. Let's see here. Okay, Tamara Smith asked if I could show us, if I could show the group my blog. Absolutely. Again, a link to this blog will be in the, will be available in the actual session notes. And then also, if you want, Gina, if you want to unmute Joy Rich while I share my screen and show my blog, that'd be great.
Joy is unmuted.
Awesome.
Hey, Matt.
What's up?
This is Joy Rich. For those of you that don't know me, I oversee work-based learning on the collegiate side here in Tennessee, and love those suggestions that you gave, Matt, about the chamber. There's a few more that we have developed through our Work-Based Learning Summit that will help with your virtual connections with employers and your students. One is we are hosting work-based learning forums, virtual forums. And so I'm leading that at the state level, but our local chapters at TCATs and community colleges are doing that as well. And they start, like you said, with their advisory council and then invite other industry partners. So you can always create an invitation to join a virtual forum. And that's simply you explaining the work-based learning opportunities and getting their feedback. We're also putting in student virtual forums. So once each term, in a semester term, it would be twice. Students will actually engage in that virtual forum, and there will be prompts, questions that will be asked by the coordinator, things that they've experienced, you know, that go along with that PLP. And with that, we will also provide a professional development component to those virtual forums. Another thing I would like to recommend for any of you, and specifically if you're new to the area, connect with your local TCAT. Every single Tennessee College of Applied Technology has an active work-based learning program, and those coordinators are always willing to share their industry contacts with you. And it may be one of those work smarter, not harder, where the two of you work together on those virtual forums. Another thing on your Skills USA side that you have the opportunity to help is we are putting in virtual Meet the Employer events and virtual interview contests. And those are both great fits for a virtual work-based learning platform. So just add that share. And just so y'all know, I have a senior myself at home who is going to be in work-based learning. So all of these practices have been vetted through him as well to see if this is something that will keep the attention of a 17-year-old male in high school. So far, so good. If anyone
That is
has,
awesome.
I'm happy to share anything else. And Matt, feel free to share my email. It's just joy.rich@tbr.edu.
Yes, absolutely. So, and you can type that out in the chat too. So Joy
Okay.
came up with, I worked with Joy for a few years before she moved on to work at TBR, and she's fantastic. You know, she knows so much and she's done so much for work-based learning. I love the suggestions. Virtual conferences, if you have a platform to offer that, if you have the capacity to do that, excellent. Just making yourself available, interview competitions, great suggestions on Joy's end. So I do appreciate that. Someone in the chat had asked to see my blog. So here's the blog itself. You could see the date here shows Monday, May 18th or May 8th, 2017. This was literally, I guess, the last time I was in a classroom when I taught work-based learning. So, you know, every week I would put together just a simple explanation. Here are your expectations. Here are some actual resources that can be used if you wish to, you know, make use of them. Sometimes you'd have to use the resources that were shared on the screen. And I did a weekly blog. Every week that there was work, I put it up. And I would either post it on Sunday night or Monday morning, and students were expected to know what is on here and complete what is on here, right? And in addition to that, like, I also created, and I'm clicking on this link, I hope this takes us to an unbroken file. Here's a Google sheet. I literally put together a checklist of requirements for students. So this was every assignment that I would have my students complete in a work-based learning course. Mind you, I had my students for all 9 weeks. Mind you, I worked on a period schedule, and my students were with me the entire afternoon. Period 6, period 7, as soon as they're done with lunch, they're with me or at their placement, and these were the various assignments that I would have students complete. It was really simple and straightforward, just explanation of what you need to do. The blog itself would include the guiding questions that were required to be answered when they had a blog post. And when someone would make a presentation, I gave a requirement for how long it needed to be. Video, likewise, how it needed to look. A podcast, how long that needed to be, and how it needed to be edited, what sound effects they may or may not want to put in there. I don't know that I went that deep into those particular specifics, but I would mention, if you're doing a podcast, let me know. And my students took advantage. I know little about doing any of this stuff, but my students, that's their day in and day out life. They liked YouTube, I let them make YouTube videos. They liked the podcast, I let them make podcasts. They like to present and talk. They were, you know, like-minded. I allowed them to make a presentation. There was never a requirement to just type or write or enter something. And I got pretty creative with Edmodo, Blogger, and email with my students. So good question on there. I think I can go back to the chat right here and see what's on the screen. That was a conversation with Gail. Here we go. There. Should be it. All right, more chat. Okay. How many hours is the minimum? I responded in the chat as well. There's no minimum number of hours that a student is required to complete while they take their actual placements. So external placements, if they exist, there's no actual requirement for completing anything. Forgive me, for hours to complete anything. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and see who else. There's one other attendee with a hand raised. Looks like it's Connie. So, go ahead, Connie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I teach in the Comprehensive Adult Program at Tennessee School for the Deaf. And that's a program that serves our students who have already completed their special education diplomas and are working towards their occupational diplomas. Our students are between the ages of 18 to 22. and have multiple to severe special needs. They're working towards completing the schema. They may or may not receive an occupational diploma depending on their performance. And all of my students have been in job placements in the community since they began my program several years ago. However, due to COVID, we have been told now that although our school is going back, we're a residential school and we are going to be going back to classes in person, we've been told that we are not allowed to go to any of our work-based learning placements for at least the first 9 weeks, if not more. And my students have been in multiple placements, some with supported employment, others with competitive employment, just depending on the student. So I wanted to know your advice or your feedback as far as how to proceed given that situation. Additionally, students have the option of doing online from home if they choose to, and I've yet to find out if any of my students are going to be doing that option.
Okay, so there's two things that I would suggest in that instance. Number one, there is nothing that says those students cannot continue to have those jobs. They just cannot participate in those as work-based learning placements. And so depending upon what the school hours are, as long as the supports are in place for students to get themselves to the job site and home from the job site outside of school hours, I'm under the impression that they should still be able to work. It just won't be a part of their educational experience.
Do you mind if I, I don't mean to play devil's advocate, but because we're a residential school, when the director of instruction and the superintendent said the students cannot go to off-campus work-based learning, that takes away, they live there, that takes away the supports for them to go and have that job.
Yeah, okay.
But they cannot, they can't.
That's a point of clarity that I appreciate, because for students who work on their own, right, and in any instance where they're not in a residential facility, even if the district prohibits external placements, it doesn't mean that once the school day is over, they can't go work. But in this instance, because it's a residential facility, that's actually not the case. So with that said, if you have in-person instruction, then I would direct you to two places. If you click on one of the file that actually includes the presenter notes, the last set of links includes blurbs and links to different special education work-based learning settings and success stories. And Blake Scherer, who works for VR, Voc Rehab, he shared those with me, and I can share his email address with you in the chat as well. But while you have your students in person, think about that Perkins V definition-based learning. Simulated environments. So within your classroom, and I don't know what the classroom looks like, but off the top of my head, if there was a way in which you could set up a simulated work environment to refine students' skills that they would actually be practicing if and when they do return to the workplace, you could set up, in the same way that a high school may, a school-based enterprise. You could, in fact, start to operate a school-based enterprise with your students. And there is a lot of opportunities. There's a Facebook group for school-based enterprise that you can join. And I don't have it off the top of my head. I can't share it with you, but Connie, I'll make sure to connect you with the person who connected me to that school-based enterprise Facebook group as well. So I'm going to type in the chat Blake Scherer's email address, and we'll be able to kind of go from there. I don't know that we have time for one more question, but by all means, I do appreciate you guys listening in on this session, asking questions, participating in whatever capacity that you could with this technology scenario that we're dealing with. And at this time, I'm going to share the code word that you will need to complete your survey. The key word for the session is TAN, T-A-N, TAN. And so if and when you participate and complete the survey, make sure to enter that as the code word. We do appreciate your time. Thank you guys for joining us. If you need anything else, my email, always available. My phone, always on. I pride myself on responding as promptly as I can. So thank you all for everything you've done. I will leave the session open for another 10 minutes just to kind of discuss other things. Those of you who don't wish to discuss anything further, feel free to log off. Gina and I will make ourselves available for 10 more minutes for anyone who needs. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, Matt.
Hey, Sean. Hello.
Hey,
Joe.
what was the key word again? I was doing
TAN.
something.
T-A, no problem. It is TAN. T-A-N.
Okay,
TAN.
thank you.
Yep. I'm putting it in the chat right now, too.
There's Carmen. Hi, Carmen.
Good morning, guys. Wonderful presentation.
Thanks.
Matthew, this morning, the Pathways Employer Engagement session,
Yes.
I believe Justin, Danny, Derek, and Pamela shared a model that they got some input from you on that talked
Yes.
about the whole career awareness exploration. Anyway, they had some very specific activities at all levels, and some of that could actually be used in the virtual setting.
Oh, yeah.
It was a one-sheet page, so that may be something the person that you're going to reach back with that's at the School of Deaf may, benefit from. Also, if you won't mind copying me on your correspondence with her, because we have students that are hearing impaired,
Awesome.
and so they will need to go ahead and make some adjustments as well.
Fantastic.
Thank
Yeah,
you, guys.
Thank you. Hey, Valerie. Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes, ma'am.
Well, I just had a couple of questions, and I was trying to take a few notes as I was going, but typically I require my students to be in the workplace at least 10 hours per week to make up for any class time that they have missed. But I know with this virtual that may not be possible. So do we need to have a minimum number of assignments that they're going to complete to get a work-based learning credit?
So I guess I'll have to ask you this, because does your school have work-based learning in the master schedule?
Yes.
As in, okay, so the students, if they are not in the workplace, they'll report to your classroom, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so what you would want to do then is offer classroom instruction virtually or in person, depending upon the model, through lectures, through projects, and the only requirement is that students attend and master the standards.
Okay.
Right? Hours requirements, if you locally wish to make that decision, you may. However, there is no federal or state mandated number of hours, if that makes sense. So you will have class from, let's say, 1:30 to 2:15. Let's say that's your class period. During that time, you deliver instruction, you facilitate discussions, you incorporate partners, and you assign work. And students are expected to complete that work, and that work is expected to be sufficient to master the course standards for whatever work-based learning course it is that you teach. Beyond that, it's no different, the same hours requirement. If it's virtual, if they're required to be in their math class from 8:10 to 9:15, then they better be in that math class from 8:10 to 9:15. And likewise, if they've got your work-based learning class from 1:30 to 2:45, you must then be in that classroom in that space from 1:30 to 2:45. Does that make sense?
And Valerie, this is Gina. I would suggest, of course, the kids maintaining a portfolio as proof of whatever projects or artifacts that you've created during your work-based learning time. That's your evidence that they were in class and created projects to meet the standards.
Yes, we always do a portfolio because I have my students, after we initially get general workplace safety and several other things out of the way, I have them do assignments once a week, and then the other 4 days they're released to go to their jobs. But I'm afraid during this time, a lot of them may end up not getting to go to work. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how to handle that.
Yeah, you're going to need to occupy that time with some instruction. Like it would be no different than if you were assigned to teach a different course. You'll have to occupy that time with instruction. That's kind of why, like in this presentation, we said connect with your advisory council, connect with your existing business partners, connect with your chamber, connect with your school counselors. Make it a team effort and design, and just reach out, be open. Hey, here's a course that I teach. I think you can give my students some great insight. You want to be a mentor? Do you want to guest speak? Do you want to come in and virtually chat with us a few times a week or a few times a month? Whatever works, you let me know. And then as the coordinator, you have to use that creativity to design assignments to be either reflective, responsive, or something in some capacity that connects to the standards based off of the content that your partners deliver. Or you then deliver it yourself if you don't have, the people scheduled that day. Does that make sense?
It does.
Cool. Good stuff. Flossie Brown, please, I think you're unmuted now. Oh, no, she's not. Unmute. There we go. Go ahead, Flossie.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. I just wanted to ask a quick question. I exited the meeting, but
Okay.
it kicked me all the way out, and I didn't get an opportunity to do the survey. So
Okay.
I just came back into the meeting, and I was gonna just wait until you closed out the meeting. Perhaps the survey would pop up then.
Yeah, so the survey is going to show up in the actual GTR platform, like where you would access your schedule. So if you're able to go into your actual meeting, or forgive me, go into your, what's the word I'm looking for, your account on for the Summer Institute, it should be available.
Okay.
And if it's not, then we'll just kind of.
Below our meeting schedule, it should say link survey, and click on that, and then put the keyword in, TAN, T-A-N, all small case, and you should be good to go.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I experienced normally on the other sessions that I was in. Once I clicked the leave button, it would take me back to where the survey was, but it didn't do it in this case.
Oh, okay. Sure.
All right.
Perhaps once we close this out, then it'll be available. I apologize for that.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Cool. And we got two more. Let's see here. Sarah?
Sarah Sanchez. Okay. Yep. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I actually teach criminal justice, and the age appropriation for getting into the academy for as far as law enforcement goes is 21. Mm-hmm. So my kids don't actually get the opportunity to do work-based learning. I'm new at this, teaching criminal justice, so I was wondering if you guys had heard of anybody else that was teaching criminal justice that had gone into some different area where these kids can do work-based learning.
Oh, my criminal justice students, well, first of all, depending upon like law, public safety, and corrections, right? So criminal justice, if it is police related, what my students had, I had 3 students one year, all of whom wanted to go into the force. And they knew, I can't go into the force, Matt, what am I going to do? Well, they called me Mr. Spinella. But what I would tell them is join the Police Explorers program. If you have an Explorers program in your local area, there's Police Explorers, then there's one associated with Air Force, I believe. And those programs allow you to do certain activities, and they actually have a very formal curriculum that is set up. And what I did was I took a look at the curriculum and I figured out how it aligned to the work-based learning course standards. And I had my students really just participate and complete a lot of those. They got little badges and micro-credentials, and it familiarized them with the various people on the force who were actually operating in a hiring capacity and in a capacity that would allow them to, once they turn 21, join the force. So this is years ago. I believe one of them is now a police officer with the sheriff's department, and the other 2 ended up going to college and they wanted to become lawyers instead. I don't know. But it's an opportunity locally if you have an Explorers program, as well as any law office would be able to give you information on the corrections experience. They'd allow someone to shadow, and someone could be a mentor to show them about, what the process looks like. There are also a lot of tutorials if you partner with your local police department, sheriff's office, where they could give virtual internships. Additionally, I have a brother-in-law, and he got in on, he's not on the force yet, but the way he got his foot in the door is he's a clerk. And anyone can intern or work in the clerk's office. So you can work, forgive me, I'm 99% sure he started when he was 17, working in the clerk's office. Might not be right about that, but that leads me to believe that anyone can work in the clerk's office or a back office capacity before they turn 18, and certainly before they turn 20. Does that kind of help you out?
It does. It does. Thank you very much.
Okay, Josh, last question here.
Let me find him. Okay, go ahead, Josh.
He's on mute. Josh Eason.
Yeah, he's gonna have, it says, I can't unmute him.
Oh, there he is. He's unmuted. Hey, Josh.
He should be. He's unmuted.
Yeah, he's unmuted.
Hey, Josh, still there? I don't think he's there anymore.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, for staying on with us that extra 10 minutes. We're good to go. We started on time. We're at 10:25, 10 minutes right after our presentation is the amount of time we're supposed to give. So looks like we're ending on time, too. I appreciate you guys for coming on. As always, feel free to email me, call me, whatever you need. I'll be glad to kind of help you or connect you to anyone that can help. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you.
Bye, guys.